Hello and welcome to the last webinar of the year. Today we're going to be talking about sales management for any size business. For those of you joining from around the world, good day, good morning, good afternoon, and for some of you, good night. It's very early for some of you, I see here. First question before we get started, if you can hear me okay. So if you just can answer here if the audio is coming through correctly. Just let me know here. All right, the poll should be out there. Okay, the first votes are coming in. Okay, the audio seems to be clear. Yep. Okay, no problem. So we're going to proceed. Welcome and thank you so much for taking the time for joining. If this is your first webinar here, let me just run you through a little bit of the process. We're using Zoho Showtime, awesome webinar tool. If you have any question, you can do that via raising questions over here. They come to me and I can answer them for you. And this is how we can get some interaction going. If you want to take some notes, there is a little note field underneath here. Those notes will eventually be emailed to you. They're your notes. They will not be shared by anyone, but it's just convenient to type them within the application. If you want to go back to a previous slide, you will see that in the slide bar on the right-hand side. Currently, as is shown here in this picture, there's only one slide, but you'll see the two previous slides here. So you can move backwards and then forwards back to the slide that the presenter, that will be me, is in at the moment. So feel free to go back and forth on slides and ask questions when you have to. Okay, so today's topic is sales management for any size businesses and how that drives with CRM. A little bit about me. I've been doing business applications for 25 plus years. I work with top tier ERP and CRM systems. Work for large vendors as well as small system integrators. And I've done projects all over the world. And what you'll find out is, you actually seen all these projects, it's not that much different. And today, the reason for this topic, sales management for any size business, is sales management is actually a link between sales and operations. It's not just having the discussion with your salespeople. Are you making your targets? This is actually allowing you to plan your cash flow, as we'll see later, a plan for capacity, plan for business growth. So it provides a leading metric, and not just a leading metric, it's the key leading metric that is required for your business planning. So not implementing sales management in your CRM, great to have a customer 360 view, we gotta have it, but you're missing out on all that business growth foundation that we're gonna set up here. All right, let's just move on. So the promise of a CRM, and I mentioned it before, the customer 360 view. We know what's going on with the customer, etc. So we can see if their help desk tickets open, we can see if there's a project going on, etc. And the other thing is the best sales process can be replicated across your sales people. That's also another thing that CRM is very good at doing. And we know everything from anywhere. So we have access to our CRM systems when we're using our mobile phone or we're using our desktop client. And then finally is you enter the data once, you can use it many times. So that's the promise of the CRM system in a nutshell. Yet what we see in practice, and this has everything to do with the implementation and the effort that goes into it, is the CRM tends to be disconnected from the rest of the organization. The information that's in CRM tends to be going for sales only. There seems to be no investment in the leading process. Once the sales pipeline and stage have been set up, they don't tend to change that much. And that means we're actually filling the information to get there. And I'll give you an example. I was working on a very complex sale, and the salesperson actually had it in the pipeline for 20%, yet we went through all the sales stages and went from 20% 6 months ago to a closed one 6 months later, but it didn't reflect of any of those stages. So it was not possible for us to actually do some sales predictions. And that's very important when you want to do capacity planning. So there was no leading, in many organizations, there's no leading process. We just fill in the pipeline to show what's won and what's not won. The data in CRM goes nowhere, and it is fed from nowhere. So if we're lucky, the data from CRM actually feeds your accounting system, but it actually should go through your entire organization, and everything that is in your organization should feed into CRM. So as a result, we end up with a Rolodex. And if you remember the Rolodex, that's the rolling business card or calling card tool that we used to have before actually we had computers. And that's an expensive Rolodex. Now, the other side of it is it could also be an order entry system, which means we log an order in CRM and then someone actually starts doing the delivery work. We miss out on all the sales management aspect of that, and this is what that webinar is about. So CRM for sales management. Okay, so what's the scope? What does it contain? Because we're obviously not talking just customer 360 here. It's actually from the opportunity or the deal to the order, all the steps in there. So I would say we touch a little bit on the marketing funnel here as well, but the sales management aspect itself is from opportunity to order. So that's the sales funnel. The dependency is that you need to have an appropriate process for each of your sales cycles. And there's more than one sales cycle in most businesses. And we talk about those as well. The second dependency is we need to have near real-time updates. It is no use to plan capacity if your information is weeks old. We need to know where things are and how we're going to close the week, the month, and the quarter. So updates are important, and they're just not only just relevant in the moment when you actually win the sale and get your commission as salesperson or sales manager. We really need to have an idea on how the marketing funnel is depleting into the sales funnel and how the sales funnel is converting through those stages. So it's hard. So why would we do it? And as the picture says here, it's trying hard is not enough when you're in sales or when you're planning your business. Now, one of the most challenging models in any business is the sawtooth revenue model, or we call it also feast and famine. You're either very busy delivering or you're very busy selling the work because you haven't been selling enough. And it usually is because we're so busy delivering, we stopped selling. The feast and famine model is usually it's when you don't have a CRM sales management in place, it hits you by surprise. You're either very busy, you know the project is going to end, and then you're just looking for work and no income is coming in. But then the smaller your business, the more the sawtooth are actually very sharp and very deep valleys in between. So what we need to have is we need to plan forward-looking capacity. Now, if you're in a services organization, obviously the capacity is the hours that you can sell. In other words, your bench time. I need to understand that if I got X number of deals with so much value in the pipeline and at certain percentages and with an expected close date, is that I actually have the capacity to deliver those deals. In a service organization, it's the bench time that actually generates the bench that you allocate to the deal, as in the actual consultants that you bill out. They give you the income. It's not winning the deal itself. Similar for inventory planning. So if you plan forward with your inventory, your forward-looking inventory plan, then that gives you the ability to actually invoice because only delivered items are invoiced. So the other side of it is, and this is the forward-looking capacity, and that's when you win deals. The other side of it is we also know when to ramp up our marketing. And we'll talk about the funnel a little bit later on how the marketing funnel links into your sales funnel. If your sales funnel gets a little bit empty on the top with the qualified deals, that means your marketing is really late at ramping up. So you can ramp up your marketing when there's still time. So that's why we bother on that. And in this webinar, we actually show some little tricks on how to organize that in a structured manner. So how does this all work? And it's a tale of two funnels. I've mentioned it before. There's a sales funnel and there's a marketing funnel. And the marketing funnel feeds into the sales funnel, and the sales funnel then is a cyclical process within the marketing funnel. Now, how does that work? So marketing funnel, there's various definitions of that. I like to use this one, which is people are aware of your business, but you're not aware of your potential clients yet. You become aware of your potential clients, you know who they are, and then obviously the next step is you have engagement with them. That engagement builds trust, a trust builds an order, so to become a customer. And that whole process of the order, that's your sales funnel. So you actually qualify and all that, whatever your sales stages are up to a close, and you obviously want repeat business. So that's the little arrows going around in circles. The next stage after customer is obviously you have an advocate, someone who is promoting your business actively for you. There's a very loyal customer. So that's how the marketing funnel feeds into your sales funnel. So if your qualified sales funnel is running empty, and if you have, let's say, a 6 month duration of your sales process for something complex, then you know that you need to put more effort into your marketing funnel. That means we need to make more of our brand go out, brand awareness, get more unknown awareness, and transform that into engagement via known awareness, engagement, trust, and then create more customers into the funnel. So those two funnels work very closely together. All right, I see a question here. All right. So the question is, how does the marketing funnel and the sales funnel then work together in the CRM system itself? That's actually a very good question because not many CRM systems actually have a very solid marketing function. That's something that came in the last um, 7 to 8 years ago. Actually, more emphasis was given on marketing. But yes, you should have a CRM where you actually engage the marketing aspects of it. And it's not just a CRM function, you got marketing software as well, but they should link into each other. So if you have a particular marketing effort that you do, for instance, on social media, that should feed into your leads in CRM because your leads funnel in CRM is actually your first stage when things happen in your CRM system. So that's where you can see the leads. They are your leads to be qualified, and the sales task is then to basically empty that bucket and move them either into deals that you can talk about or as in not qualified, don't want to talk about it yet. So the handover point from your specialized marketing software into your CRM software tends to be the leads entity in CRM. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. So going forward, as I said, it's sales and marketing, and it's marketing and sales. So they work in unison. You can't just say like, okay, marketing hands over to sales and they're done with it. Because then you just start counting the number of leads that come into the sales system. But in the end, the marketing target is the number of qualified opportunities that come out of that. That should actually be a marketing target. So it's not just I create 10,000 leads, that's fantastic. But if only 3 opportunities come out of those 10,000 leads, you actually haven't created value. You've created a lot of cost because those leads need to be followed up. So the number of and value of the qualified opportunities is actually a marketing target. So marketing fills the funnel with those qualified opportunities. The sales target is obviously the number and value of the won opportunities. So that's if the opportunity is qualified, then obviously there is an ability to do sales, and we know we're going to lose some, but the percentage that falls through as a closed deal, that's a sales target. So those are two different targets, but actually in the same flow. I think the line on the top that actually sums it, marketing fills the funnel, sales has to empty it. And that's how they work together. Now, if the funnel is empty, then obviously there's a marketing problem. But if the funnel is losing deals before they close, you got a sales problem, right? So those are the two things that we really need to look into it as a holistic system. It's not just a sales or marketing issue. It's a sales and marketing issue. Okay. So what happens in the funnel? And here's just a very simple one. And obviously there are much more complicated funnels out there, but we know we're going to lose deals. We know that we're not going to sell to everybody. So not every lead is going to be qualified. We just look for the higher percentage than last time, right? We want to have a certain percentage. And we know that every sales cycle, every sales stage, we're going to lose a number of those deals that just don't go to the next stage. The reason is, it's not because we got bad salespeople, but we know that the further you go along the sales, the more you actually qualify, and the more you have the ability to lose some customers going like, this is not for us, or the price is too high, or you're in a competitive tender, we went with a competitor. These things happen. So what you do is you already know that you're going to lose some deals, and this actually becomes important for your sales management when we drive through the numbers. Because what we do is we look at, okay, in this funnel here, this very simple funnel, we know that from the 1,000 leads, only 100 become a prospect, right? So we know that 900, that's 90%, will lose from that stage, right? In this particular example. And if you then go further, we know that we lose 90% of the prospects and only have 10% converted as customers. Now, if I were in this company and managing that, I think like, okay, but first of all, I'd like to have more better qualified leads. And the second thing is I probably want to win a little bit more than just 10%, right? 20% would actually be a good thing from the deal qualification till the end. So, but what it actually tells us is that from the 1,000 leads, we're only selling 10, we're converting 10 to a customer. So what happens if I only have 900 leads? Then I know with the same mathematics, I only have 9 customers, right? So it's a numbers game, and you can only play the numbers game if you have the numbers. And this is where in a lot of CRM implementation, we put a lot of effort on the sales and the percentages, but we actually don't really know where those numbers go and how we actually build a proper report of it. And that's and how we just put that into the sales management thing. And that's what this webinar is about. All right, a question here. So, okay, so yeah, so you mentioned this funnel is a bit as an example, but what does a good funnel look like? That's a great question. I'll actually show you some pictures of a funnel when we go forward in the webinar here. There's not a single funnel that works for every company. And the percentages, they differ per type of sale that you have as well. If you're a very commoditized market, very price sensitive, then your funnel looks different than if you're in a very specialized market. The competition plays a role as well, but also the buying process of your customer. So if you sell into aerospace and defense, then you obviously have a different funnel than if you sell into a much simpler, let's say, the small business market. So let's look at some examples further on as well. And here are two not name stages. But these are, each of the pipeline elements here in the funnel on the top to the bottom, you see them getting narrower. It's kind of like shaped like a funnel. The stages themselves can differ from the product that you sell in the market you sell into. Now I've shown here two different pipelines. So one is by count. So what I do is basically you count the opportunities by stage. So if you have 100 qualified opportunities, let's say here 40.3% it says, but it's the number of deals, 40.3% is in the qualified stage, the top stage. And I know I'm going to lose most of them. So if you do it by count, then your funnel on the top should be larger than all the way in the bottom, because we know we're going to lose the majority of them, right? If you do the same pipeline, but then by value, then each stage should be roughly at the same size, right? Now, how does that work? So if I have 100 opportunities in qualified, and why is that value then the same as the next stage when I have a lot less opportunities? Because the value that you actually report in the value funnel is a weighted value. So you multiply the value of the deal, let's say it's a $100,000 deal, times the percentage of winning. Let's say it's 20% of the deals in qualify actually you win. They go all the way through to a closed one. So the $100,000 actually is in that funnel then as $20,000. So you add up all the deal values in a particular stage and multiply it by the stage's value. And if you do that well, then roughly each stage will have a similar value. And that allows you to actually plan at the end of the business, get a little bit of a foresight of my funnel is worth, let's say, $1.3 million. So roughly here it's between 1.3 and $1.4 million is the funnel size here. That's great, because you know that at the end of the funnel when you close, then your business is relatively stable. So if your funnel values differ a lot, and there can be many reasons, right? It could be obviously that you're all of a sudden the big deals are not coming in. It could be you got one bird deal, right? One big deal that you didn't expect, and it's somewhere in the middle, so your pipeline bulges a little bit. That can happen, but then you catch that one with the pipeline count by stage. There's another question coming in. So in typical CRMs, which pipeline is demonstrated? Is that by count or by value? In most CRMs, the standard pipeline reports are only by value. I'm advocating you probably want to have both next to each other. So if your CRM allows you to configure a pipeline by count, I would actually show that next to the pipeline by stage, by value, sorry. Because both of them give that information, that extra insight that each of those individual pipelines can't give you. So give you the example again of that huge deal that is somewhere in the middle there, that is just 3 times bigger than any of the other deals that you have in your pipeline. That will not show up in your pipeline by count. It will show up in your pipeline by stage, right? Because that bulges a bit. But your pipeline by count just shows you exactly the number of deals. However, if you do have a lot of small deals coming in the top, right? A lot of small deals, it gives you a high count, but it doesn't give you a high value. So each of them give you different information that you need to manage your business going forward. So I hope that answers your question. If you can put them side by side, that would actually be from a sales management perspective fantastic, because it gives you the incentive to talk to your marketing, like, hey, we need more deals, but it also gives you a view to discuss with operations what capacity they need to be looking forward to, or in the worst case scenario, when you can expect overcapacity, and you need to have some cost saving measures in place. All right. So just to summarize, to get your sales in shape, the pipe, and this is particularly your pipeline by count. Think of it as, if it's in shape, you think Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's the inverted triangle. And if you remember from the 1980s, Al Bundy, that's not the right shape for a pipeline, right? So if it's bulging in the wrong areas, and let's say the bit pear-shaped, you probably will have a marketing problem, and you need to really engage your marketing effort. So inverted triangle, you're going to have either a growing business or at least a stable business, and it's predictable. If you're in the top of your sales funnel is small, by my account, then your marketing efforts aren't working well enough. All right, just to summarize, okay, what stages? So this was the question we had before, like, are all pipelines the same? No, they're not. And actually, a single business can have multiple pipelines. So because you think, for instance, you're selling a software subscription. This is the market that I happen to be in. It's a relatively complex sale because you don't buy software every day. It can change significantly your business, particularly the business transformational software and digital transformation enablers. So that will be a complex process, right? There can be multiple decision factors like risk, cost, complexity, fit for business, fit for purpose, etc. There are influencers, sponsors, champions, decision makers, and power sponsors on those deals. It's high value, high risk products. It's a capital investment, or in case of software subscription, it's still operational investment, but there's a project behind that, etc. So that's a complex sale. But if I'm then looking at selling, for instance, a renewal or an additional license, or maybe even just the support services for that same thing, that's actually a whole different funnel with a lot less complexity in there. So even a single business can have multiple funnels. So you can look at it from the process on what you're selling. Is it simple or is it complex? You can also look at the customer's buying process. What are the activities that you need to go? So you can build a funnel very functional, saying focus on the activities that you need to do. So I need to qualify, I need to do needs analysis, I need to demonstrate, I need to propose, I need to negotiate. Or you can look at your customer gates. And the customer gates typically reflect more into the more complex sales because they just have more customer gates, right? So focus on customer gates is customer stated the problem with you. Customer evaluates the solution. Customer states on how your solution fits the problem. And that's actually a sales stage in the power, pain, vision, value, and control methodology, where you actually have the customer demonstrate the value of your product back to you, right? So that you have the bigger buy-in. So again, those are different approaches to your funnel stages. And it depends on what your business, actually what your market is and how your customer buys stuff, because your sales funnel is nothing but aligning your activities to your customer's buying process. That's the first stage. But then obviously you don't want to align your activities to every customer uniquely, right? Because that's typically done only for very high millions and millions of dollars type of sales. What you want to do is then slowly move your customers' buying activities into your sales process. And that's what a funnel is for. So it's very activity focused, and one of them is more on the customer stages, and for a simpler sale, it's more on what you do to actually get them across the line. One of the things that I really would caution against is putting too many stages in your sales funnel. If it doesn't if it doesn't get your sale closer, so if it doesn't increase the percentage of winning the deal, it's probably an activity you shouldn't be doing, right? So if you have something in the sales funnel and everybody goes like, well, we have to do this, but it doesn't actually bring the sale closer, maybe that's an activity you don't want to add into that list. If it is something you absolutely must do and you wouldn't win the deal if you didn't do it, that by definition means that you get closer to the sale. So be careful with too many stages. Okay. All right, let's take an example of a high value product here. This piece of industrial equipment, I think it's used to tear up roads. I have no idea what this machine is called, but it looks pretty cool. This is not an impulse buy, right? This is not like, okay, do me 5 and put a ribbon around it. These machines can be several $100,000, if not over $1 million. Myself, I worked for a company in the Middle East selling mobile drilling rigs, and they were around $1.5 million each, and I'm talking US dollars. And then there's a significant amount that is required to actually commission them as well. So it's not just you buy them and you put them into the desert and they'll work. They have to be commissioned. There's a whole project about it. So to sell such a piece of equipment could be months of work, sometimes even years, right? It depends on how big that is. So for a machine like this, that could be, a significant purchase, and those companies that actually use this equipment will probably buy more than one and standardize and all that stuff. So the sales funnel of this will be very much focused on getting aligned to the buyer's process. And the buyer's process can go anywhere from risk mitigation to obviously budget management. They have to be secure that if there is downtime, how fast you resolve it, how do you minimize downtime, do you do proactive maintenance? All those elements are part of the buying process of the customer buying these machines. And those elements will then be reflected into your sales cycle. All right, so this will be a complex sales cycle. Now the other one here is the flip side, a candy bar in the supermarket. So let's assume we're selling the candy bar to a consumer. What is your view on selling a candy bar to a consumer? It's a couple of options here that I provide. Would you put it in the CRM? How would you capture that? All right, let's see, I'm working with very smart people here. It is an impulse buy. There is no pipeline, and that's absolutely correct. So the options were there's a decision maker, an influencer, you capture that. Low value product, it's on the supermarket, typically near the checkout. It's an impulse buy. There's no pipeline. You don't need to analyze who buys and who doesn't buy. It's just not valuable enough. So this here, so we've seen here the candy bar example. So you have to know what you're selling. That's number one. So it's a candy bar versus the big machine. But the second part we need to know is what is the customer actually buying? Now, from the candy bar itself, we're buying instant gratification. But now we're actually going to put that upside down and say, hey, we're not selling that candy bar to the consumer. We're now the salesperson merchandising the supermarket with the candy bar. So we're actually offering the new candy bar here, and we say, okay, buy this one. Now the supermarket can buy a lot of things, right? They can say that obviously they don't buy instant gratification. So they can look at, okay, what am I buying here? Is it a fashionable brand, right? Is it fashion? Well, it's a candy bar, so probably not. Is the particular brand that people are flocking towards? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm sure that someone can fill out something really, really clever as a marketing plan and actually have people addicted to a brand of a candy bar. The other one is it margin? And this is actually key. Am I buying an opportunity to make more margin? Now, as we know, a supermarket is a low margin volume business. And there's a very good reason in most supermarkets where you see at the checkout counter, all the candy bars and the soda cans were individually packaged, are displayed there. And it's also not a coincidence that they're displayed at the eye height of a between 6 and 12-year-old children, because they tend to influence this buy. So what we're actually selling is margin. The candy bars are high margin products. They're still low value, but they're high margin products. So the overall margin goes up. So the buyer of the supermarket is buying a margin, and that changes my sales process. Now that margin can only be made if there's consistency, if there's consistent delivery, if there actually is a product on those shelves. They can't ever be late. So they're also buying consistency, and they're buying then the logistics behind it, right? So people want that candy bar. It's available, and it's available at a low cost but a higher sell price. So it's still relatively low value. Let's say it's $1 the candy bar, but if that candy bar acquisition is only 25 cents, that's 75 cents on the dollar that they make money, right? So from a supermarket perspective, if they have, let's say, 500 customers coming through every hour through that whole to that particular checkout lane, and a percentage of those people actually buy those candy bars, you'll see the overall margin on the supermarket sales go up. And that's what you're selling here. So that changes the entire pipeline. Right? I'm actually quite interested in learning your thoughts on how that would actually affect the sales cycle here. So what is in your view, the candy bar, how does it affect your sales cycle? All right, the first answers are coming in. So here's a good one. It affects you need to sell trust on your ability to deliver consistently. Yes. It's a price buy. You need to offer a lower buying price from than your competitor. That could be true. It's a very interesting point, actually, and this is a little bit beyond the scope of this webinar, but if you look at the candy bar pricing itself, they tend to be the same price everywhere you buy them. So if I buy a particular brand A in supermarkets, around the corner, it tends to be very similarly priced in the supermarket somewhere else. And the logic behind that is that if they slightly have a price variation, you could actually say, oh, I'm not buying it here, I'm buying it somewhere else, even if it's only a 5 cents difference. And that's how sensitive these things are. So what you actually want to do is you want to have a kind of a recommended retail pricing, but a higher margin underneath there. So it's not an impulse buy, it's not a price buy from at checkout, but if your price is higher, it tends to give an excuse like, oh, they're expensive here, we're not buying it. But it's actually more in the supermarket and the retail logic than anything else. So yeah, good efforts. It's definitely, you have more stages in the pipeline here, and your buyer's risk is actually a lot more applicable than what you're actually selling in this instance. All right. So now we've actually talked about the pipeline. What do we do with this? So we got a sales pipeline. I already said, your sales is average success rate. So you multiply the average success rate times the value in your pipeline. So you get a weighted value in each stage. And that's all great. But we have now the estimated value of the portfolio of opportunities. But what do we do with this? Well, there's one key metric that is still missing, and that's the time buckets. So when are we expected to close those deals? So for example, if I do my forecast, I do it quarterly. I'm very used to a quarterly run business. You can run it monthly as well. So either quarterly or monthly run businesses. It's important to know when you're actually closing the deal. Now, again, with the impulse buy, it's either you buy it or you buy it not, right? There is no pipelines. But if you're dealing with more higher values and you actually have several stages in your pipeline, so what you need to know is what stage am I in, what's my next activity, but you also work out what's the close plan and when is it expected to close. And you constantly update the close date. Now, if you have the weighted pipeline and the expected close date, you can have a continuous gap to close report. And a gap to close report is nothing but a report that shows, here are the deals that I have already closed this month. Here is what's still in my pipeline that is estimated to close this month, and I add them together, and this is my gap to close. And if you're doing it well, then you've overachieved. And if you're, have some work to do, great, because if you close those deals, it's weighted value, so it's probably going to end up that way. You're going to make your month. And if you have a negative value there's still shortage, that's your gap. That's what you need to have actually more deals in your pipe or close at a higher rate. In other words, if normally you close 50% in this stage, you got to do 60%. You got to bring more in, right? So what does that look like? So here's an example, right? So you got your sales targets over here. There's a total and there's per person. You can see what a person already achieved, and you can see what the pipeline deal is. Now, you can configure this in most CRMs, and this should be your weighted pipeline deals, right? It should not be the actual pipeline value, but the weighted pipeline value. And the weighted pipeline value with an estimate to close in the month, in this example, July 2019, right? So if your pipeline is, let's say, $15,000, but that $15,000 one deal is estimated to close in September, that should not be in this report. Now, if there's a pipeline shortage, you can see here the percentage of shortage. That actually means, particularly in this example, Pooja needs to bring in more sales. This is an excellent tool to manage your business growth and to manage your business consistency. Whether you do it monthly or quarterly, and again, it depends on your business. So if you tend to have more deals in the pipeline, but shorter deal runtime, monthly is fantastic. If you have longer running deals, and typically it means you have less deals in the pipeline as well, then I would recommend going for a quarterly pipeline and a quarterly managed business. I would not recommend, and most CRMs don't even allow you to do this, to go for a semi-annual or an annual pipeline. There's just too much time in there and too much slippage. So this here gives you a great insight. Are you going to make your month or are you not going to make your month? Now, obviously, the closer you get to the end of that month, the more accurate these numbers will be, right? But if you still have a shortage at the end of the month, the less chance you have to actually fix them as well. All right. Now, there is a critique with the sales pipeline method. Number one, it relies on human estimates. So the first thing is, when we have to deal in the qualification stage, we're just going to make up a number, right? And the more experienced we are, the closer we get to reality, right? So those numbers tend to change when they progress through the stages in the pipeline because we know more, right? But it relies on human estimates, and also the close dates. The further you are in the pipeline, the more accurate that becomes. But if you're very early in the pipeline, you put in a close date, but you haven't written a close plan yet with your customer, right? If the sales big enough, you write a close plan. So there is a bit of critique in that. The second thing is, you got to progress the pipeline. I gave you the example before when we started this webinar, when a sale, it was actually substantial value. It was not super high value. It was over 10 million. So not something trivial, and it had been in the pipeline, and we've been working through all the sales stages, but the salesperson never actually progressed the deal through the pipeline itself. Now you would question the sales manager, obviously, like, hey, why is this deal not progressing? But it went from 20% to 100%, and it was just one stage, and it was a 6-month cycle that we're working on, and it just flipped 100%. All of a sudden, this deal comes in. Now, if you're planning capacity like that, then all of a sudden you have a deal from an X amount, from 20% all the way to 100% in a day. You don't see it progress. So you actually can't plan your capacity on it. So if you're a services-oriented business, you may not have the people to deliver it. If you're an inventory-oriented business, you may not have the goods in store to sell. And if it's a high-value item, it usually is you buy it on order and you have it configured on order. That causes delay in your delivery, and delay in delivery is a delay in invoicing. A delay in invoicing obviously is a delay in getting paid. So it is, in my view, very good to write as part of the incentives that your salespeople actually have to do predictable sales. So an unpredictable sales that goes from 20% to 100%, they're not going to get full commission, for instance, right? So you got to have some incentives to build in some accuracy. Now, the other critique is if you do periodic forecasts, it may lead to sandbagging of deals. So what happens is I've made my Q1, my quarter one, but my quarter two is looking a little bit, weak at this moment. So what I'll do is I'll move this big deal over from quarter one to quarter two. So I'll write a close plan with my client and I sandbag this deal. So my quarter two is looking good as well. So I have, as a salesperson, a very consistent delivery approach. This happens in reality. So you need to be aware of that certain deals may actually slip from one quarter to the next, not because your customer actually is pushing that, because it's their buying cycle, but because it's better for your salesperson, and these things do happen. So be careful how you incentivize, because if you incentivize by quarter and you start over with 0 in the next quarter, these things happen. Notoriously, these things happen at the end of the financial year. If someone made their numbers this year, they're very happy to push the deal across to the next year and have that kickstart that new year, right? Especially if you cap bonuses. So be careful. Incentives have a big thing to do. Now, to remedy this, you got to have a weekly sales meeting. And at certain stages of your deals, and you take the exceptional deals, right? So not the low value deals, but the higher value deals that are in a certain stage, you start committing them. And that means the salesperson says, yes, I'm going to win this deal, and yes, this is going to be the month that I'm winning it in. So that means commitment. And it doesn't mean that, if it happens, they get fired. It means that they have to have a very good explanation. The second remedy, and this is something that comes in with cloud computing now, is artificial intelligence, predictive analysis, and anomaly detection. And that's actually really good. You got to have some solid data behind that, but your system, the AI, starts predicting value based on certain variables, right? Who's the salesperson? What are the steps? When is the last activity, etc. So it's building kind of a likely to close type of thing. So here's an example, right? You have your deal stages, you have your deal values, and independent of those, the AI starts saying, oh, this is a 90% chance, or an 85, or an 82. And that's purely based on quantitative analysis over your data set. Now, if you only do 100 deals in a year, or even 500 deals in a year, that's not going to work. You need thousands of them, right? So this is for the smaller business, a little bit of an overreach. Your sample size is too small. For the larger size businesses, this will be actually quite accurate. All right. Another thing that an AI can do is estimating what is a likely close bucket. When is it actually going to close? Again, this is independent of what the salesperson is saying. This is purely based on data analysis. And the same is going for the likelihood to close deals at the percentages. This does not work if you don't have enough deals. You got to have at least 3, 4, 5,000 deals in your system that are closed, and therefore a larger number that you have lost for the system to actually make these type of predictions. Right? But if you can use the AI, do use it. Okay, the other thing that we have is anomaly detection. And what that has is actually the system starts analyzing the trend and then compares that trend with, are there bluebirds? Are there things in there that are just different? And then it picks out an anomaly. So that would be the example of that one large deal in the middle of the pipeline that is just 5 times larger than anything else that you have in your pipeline. That would just be a flag over here. You could go like, hey, this is a little bit different. Let me look into that. What's actually really going on here? Because you treat those deals a little bit differently. Especially if you have this one deal that is 5 times larger than everything else. You're not going to hire, let's say your service business, you're not just going to hire consultants and delivery people to deliver that deal when the chances are 50-50 that you're going to win it. But you're also not going to wait until you're at 80% and you don't have time to hire the people. So you start looking at alternative strategies like contractors, etc. Right? So depending on what your business is, you have different answers on how you're going to deal with that. But you do need to know that there is an anomaly. Okay, so bringing this all together. So we've now looked at, okay, we got pipelines, we got the marketing funnel, we know that they're interactive. So we know that CRM is more than just a customer relationship database. And if we do this well, we can have accurate sales forecasting. And accurate sales forecasting affects all areas of the business. So we talked about the feast and the famine, the sawtooth revenue model. Well, that affects your cash flow because you got fixed costs. But it also affects your capacity planning. You got variable costs like inventory, staff that you need to hire. So your sales forecast is not just isolated to your sales department. It's actually an entire organizational-wide impact. And the more accurate your sales forecast, the more consistent your organization can run from a cash flow as well as a delivery perspective. And when people say, I need to set up for growth, what they want to say is, I want to have more salespeople. What they actually are saying is, I need to have a more consistent way of, managing my sales growth and managing that forecast and delivery growth. Because again, I've said it before, sales is just the first step. Sales allows you to deliver something, whether it's service or a product. That service or product is the step that allows you to send an invoice, and that is where the revenue starts counting. So if you're not integrated with your sales forecasting in the entire process, you're missing out on so much functionality from the CRM. Okay. Now, in order to do this, your process needs to be consistent and aligned to the buying process. So your sales process needs to be consistent. You don't want to have for every customer your own sales process, but you do need to allow it to align with the buying process of your customer. And in particular, in the more complex industries or more complex sales, think on aerospace and defense or oil and gas industry, where they manage a lot of risk. But also the retail industry, where they manage just logistics or logistical risk. Those buying process are something that you need to be very cognizant of, and you slowly adjust them into your sales process again. Right? There's just, with some industries, there's just simply less room to maneuver. But what you'll find is that their buying process are not that different amongst that industry. What I also say is you got multiple pipelines. There's not one size fits all pipeline. You can have a pipeline per industry. You can have a pipeline per item or per service. Think around selling that large industrial equipment has a different pipeline than if I sell the replacement O-ring seals and hoses on that equipment, because that's just a replacement buy. So think about what is my customer actually really buying. And then finally, it's encouraging consistent behavior from your salespeople. And that consistency is absolutely key. Okay, so that concludes the topic. Are there any questions? I see a question coming up here. Okay. All right, there's a question on the pipeline and the value stages. And how do you set those percentages? That's actually a very good question, because it's kind of like a story of the chicken and the egg. When you start with your CRM and you don't have that data, the way to set those percentages is, just look at a few months back. Okay, roughly, this is what we think it is. But because you set those percentages that way and you start forecasting your sales that way, you need to constantly look at the reality, right? It's like, I forecasted this month we're going to do $1 million in sales, but it's $1.5 million in sales. You think that's great news, and obviously it's good to sell more. But if that's consistently happening, then what you know is that your percentages are off in your pipeline. So you do need, especially if you just started, you need to measure what's actually happening. Once they stabilize, you need to take a periodic stock. Like, are we still on track? And it depends a little bit on the length of your sales cycles. Maybe you do it like, okay, if my sales cycle is 9 months, I do it in 3 turnovers of a normal sales cycle. So that's 3 times 9 months, right? And then I'm going to just check again. If your sales cycle is only a month, you can do it every 3 months, right? So again, 3 times your turnover of a sales cycle. and see if it's still accurate. But don't do it too often, especially if you see very mediocre or small changes. Then you go like, okay, I'll do it once a year or once in 2 years or every 6 cycles. But it's definitely recommended to do these analysis periodically because your market is changing. And what you notice first, if your market is changing, particularly if your market is disrupted, what you'll see is that your percentage at the top at the qualifying and needs analysis, they start dropping significantly. So you get less deals through the funnel in the next stages. And that means there's a disruptor in the market. So it's always good to reevaluate those percentages based on data. But if you don't have the data, you got to start somewhere. And you just need to be very aware as a whole organization that whatever you forecast as sales is actually still quite fluid because you're building the data in there. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, and here's a question on the AI. How does that AI work with the data that you have, and does it take industry data? So that's a good question. AIs are getting obviously smarter and smarter, and the AIs in the CRM typically work with your CRM data. So there's not necessarily an industry-wide data set that says, okay, in the industry, so many people are selling this and these are the stages, because all the stages are different. So if you work for, let's say Caterpillar, right? You got a certain set of sales stages that's Caterpillar-wide. Now the AI can analyze, your sales stage in Caterpillar. If you do the same in Komatsu, they sell similar equipment, similar markets, but their CRM may be configured differently. Actually, they are configured differently. They got different stages, right? Because they're actually different companies, and every company does a bit different. So it makes not much sense yet for an AI to sit on top of these things, plus obviously the privacy and all that stuff, and data sharing and data sovereignty. I wouldn't want to be giving my pipeline information that my competitors can use, for instance, right? But let's say if that was the case, they would have different sales stages. So it's very difficult to align those sales stages to a single common sales practice. So it is per company. So you as an organization will need to generate that data from your own data set. Yeah. Okay. If there are no further questions, thank you so much for your time. I hope this was useful for you and that you look at the CRM sales management a little bit differently than before. And that you also bring this in your organization as an opportunity to bring the consistency of sales forecasting and therefore capacity planning in the business. Now we're taking a break over the holidays, so there's no webinar in the next 2 weeks. The next one is how to get maximum value out of your CRM investment, and that will be in January the 7th in the next decade, 2020 at 8 p.m. Sydney time. In the meantime, you can obviously read and sign up to our blog. If you're not yet a Zoho user, and I see that some of my customers are here, so fantastic, glad you made it. If you're not yet a Zoho One user, you can try a full suite of apps. There's 45 apps for it. You can try them for free for 30 days to digitize your entire business. So there's an entire suite, and eventually when you do want to sign up, it is for Australian dollars 50. I think it's 30 euros per month, if I'm not mistaken. And you can do that via aurelian-group.com. So from us here in Australia, where Christmas is in the summer, have a Merry Christmas, all the best for the new year, and hopefully see you on the other side in the new decade. And stay safe and stay warm if you're in the winter. In the winter in Australia, you have no choice. We're going to stay warm. Thank you so much.